Brother David.
First of all, I want to express my thankfulness for the congregation here and asking me to come speak to you this morning. And lectureships are always a lot of fun. I enjoy them. You get a different speaker probably every day or every meeting time, and that's usually a little more interesting than just maybe having a gospel meeting and having one speaker do several lessons. But I've been parts of both lectures and gospel meetings, and it's always good to get people together to study God's Word. That's one of the most important things that we can do, is to apply the Word to our minds so that it'll help us every day, because we're in a battle, and we need to understand that we're in a battle with Satan. He's in control of the world and the things that are going on around about us, and it surely is good to see everybody here this morning. A little bit of reminiscing, and then we'll get to business here. But yes, as was said back, I don't even know, Don, what year it was. Do you know what year it was? 1989? 1989. Several families from different congregations helped to establish the congregation here in Newton Street. One of the families was a couple that worshipped with us over at Antioch at Cardwell, and near and dear to our hearts, Don and Gracie Noblin. And I would help Don. We traveled around in this area. We passed out flyers. I spoke a time or two here, I think before LR began to preach, and it was a wonderful thing to see the people in this area have a place to come. That there are lots of congregations around town. I have 3 children, and they worship at different places. One in Jonesboro, and then I've got 2 here in Paragould. But it was good to do that. I'll tell you a funny story. If anybody knows Rick Hale from out at CRC College, don't get him to go door knocking with you. We were door knocking, and boy, here comes a big dog, and it was he acted like he was going to eat us up. And I'm a lot bigger than Rick Hale. He was at that time. This was nearly 30 years ago. He grabs me and puts me in. He uses me as a shield right there. So if you go door knocking, don't go door knocking with Rick Hale. And if you see him, you can tell him I said so. It is good to be here this morning. I know a lot of folks here. I don't know a lot of folks here, and I'm sorry if I don't remember your name when the services are over today. But lots of good folks that I've known for many, many years. I worked at L.A. Darling for 19 years, and I'm still there in a way. I sell them a lot of fasteners, and I'm in there about once a week, so I still see the people over there. But most of us older employees are all gone now, so there's a whole new crew over there. But I spent my working life in that factory, and I've known several of you because of that, and it's been a very good relationship with many of you. My hair used to be black, and I had to deal with certain people. I'm not going to mention any names, but no, it's been a good relationship with all these folks. We're going to start off this morning in the book of Ephesians. Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 29. I've been at Antioch now for 28 years, going on 29. This Thanksgiving will be 29 years. I was working at Darling at night, and I was encouraged by a few folks to go to Crowley's Ridge College, and said, in the daytime you can go out there and just take a few Bible classes. And I said, well, I'd like to do that. So I went and, I enrolled, and at that time, Brother Larry Bill said, you can get a Bible degree out here. And I said, well, that might be okay, but I don't have a lot of time. I work at night at Darling. And he said, well, we'll work around your schedule. Well, it took me 3 years, but I got a 2-year degree. And that happens sometimes. But along the way, I began to study and understand the Scriptures more plainly. And that's what the Scriptures teach us to do, to study and understand it. And I had to have help, just like the Ethiopian eunuch, and just like Apollos, as Priscilla and Aquila did for him. And of the 28 years that I've spent at Antioch, classroom teaching is my favorite thing to do. I always tell everybody, I'm not much of a preacher, but I love to teach class. And you know, it's been a great thing to teach class. I was in Bible class out there one morning, and Brother Larry Bills knocks on the door, and I forget who the instructor was, whether it's Rick Hale or Art Smith or whoever. And they said, there's a congregation in the Boot Hill, Missouri, over at Cardwell, that needs somebody to fill in. Anyone interested? Well, that's why I'm here. Raised my hand. So they said, okay, we'll set you up this Sunday. You know, I've been filling in for 28, almost 29 years. But I love to teach class. In the book of Ephesians, chapter 4, verse 29, I'm going to read along with you here. He said, let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace unto the hearers. Things we say. Now just flip on over, if you'd like to the book of James. We know that there are things that we have to have in us in order to be able to talk. And that one thing for certain is our tongues. In James chapter 3, I'm going to read verses 8 through 12. It says, but the tongue can no man tame. It's an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. Therewith bless we God, even the Father, and therewith curse we men, which are made after the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceedeth blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not to be so. Doth a fountain send forth at the same place sweet water and bitter? Can the fig tree, my brethren, bear olives? Either a vine, figs? No. So can no fountain both yield salt water and fresh. Encouraging words is what I want to talk about this morning. Encouraging words. You know, I told you a little of my story. You know, I had some people. Vanessa is a beautician, and she had a regular customer, Judy Richards, and she's the one that encouraged me to go to CRC and just take some classes. Take some Bible classes. You're interested? Go take some Bible classes. And it led from that to this. You know, the tongue is something that we use every day. We talk, and some of us, I'm a professional talker. I'm a salesman. I sell bolts and nuts. And it takes lots of bolts and nuts to make the world go round. And I sell a lot of bolts and nuts all over the United States. And somebody says, well, what do you do? And I said, I talk for a living. And we can talk and we can say and we can do, but there are things that we can do. We can do great things with the gift that we have and the gift of speech. I'd like for us to look at some of the encouraging words of edification, like Paul expressed to the Ephesians. Refreshing words that we can speak. This congregation is not a lot different than what our congregation at Antioch was. We're down very considerably. The young folks, as they grow up, they go to school, they get involved in work, and they move off, and they get married, they leave, and have children, and they leave, and us older folks, you know what we do. We get older, and then we're gone. But there are things that all of us, both young and old, can do as far as encouraging words are concerned. First word, the word of gratitude. I'll tell you, there's no better feeling than to know that other people are thankful for you. And that's not much that we can do, is it? To tell someone to just throw that arm around their shoulder, or as sometimes short as I am, I have to do, I throw it around their waist. Depends on how tall they are. And just tell them and encourage them and tell them how grateful you are for what they do, what they've done, how they are, who they are, or whatever it may be. You know, the Apostle Paul, I guess if we know that the entire Word of God is inspired. But we can see in each and every one of the epistles, for instance, the epistles that Paul and Peter and John and others wrote, you can see their personalities come across in these epistles. I love to study the epistles. When we think about the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, it tells us about the story of Christ and the story of God sending His only begotten Son into the world to save us from our sins. It tells of His life, and it tells us of His death, and it tells us of His resurrection. And then we have the book of Acts that tells us how the church then was established. And the first half of the book of Acts is primarily about the Apostle Peter, and the second half of the book of Acts is primarily about the Apostle Paul. But then we have the epistles written to individuals, the epistles written to congregations. And they teach all of us, individuals and congregations, how to live in this crazy world. So when we study the epistles, I hope as you study the epistles, and this is a classroom setting, I hope as you study the epistles that you study it with this mindset that, these are some of the things that Paul, Peter, whoever may be the author of these different epistles, they genuinely felt. Let's turn to the book of 1 Thessalonians. 1 Thessalonians chapter 1, also chapter 2. Chapter 1, verses 2 and 3. He's writing to the church of Thessalonica, and you've got to go back to the book of Acts to find how Paul was handy in helping to establish the church at Thessalonica. When we think about the church at Thessalonica and all the congregations that exist in that particular area, they had to struggle. And I know sometimes in this area and in all areas it's a struggle. But words of gratitude. In verses 2 and 3 of chapter 1, Paul says, "We give thanks to God always for you all, making mention of you in our prayers, remembering without ceasing your work of faith and labor of love, patience of hope in our Lord Jesus Christ in the sight of God our Father." Also in chapter 2, verses 19 and 20, and these are not the only places. Paul does this quite often. "For what is our hope or joy or crown of rejoicing? Are not even ye in the presence of our Lord Jesus Christ at His coming? For ye are our glory and our joy." He meant those things. It wasn't just something he put in there for filler in this letter. He meant them. To see faithful brethren is so encouraging to a preacher. And as, like I said, I'm just one of these guys that reads this and talks to you about it. And there are lots of us guys, out there. But Paul was genuinely grateful for his brethren. I hope, and I'll ask you, do you tell your fellow brethren the same thing? It was mentioned today that one of the brethren here had some difficulties, and I'm sure it's probably health issues, and it's a struggle sometimes for all of us as we get older. And believe me, I didn't think I'd ever get old, but I'm old. Aches and pains. My son, my middle child, he and his wife built a new home, and we moved them in yesterday. And I don't know if we decided if this was number 6 or 7 move. And I told him it was my last one. That's it for me. I am so sore today. And thankfully, when we were unloading all the truck, my son-in-law, my oldest daughter's husband, he shows up about the time the heavy stuff's going to come off the truck. And I almost hugged his neck. I was so thankful. And I gave him some of those encouraging words of gratitude. I offered to pay him, to help. But also, my son, someone asked, "Who's preaching for you today?" Well, it's my son. He and his wife worship at Greensboro Road, and when Terry Joe's off on a meeting trip or whatever it may be, he fills in for Terry Joe at Greensboro Road. And sometimes he fills in up here at Pine Knot. He built a house about a half mile from Pine Knot, so that's going to be pretty handy for him there. But I told him I was thankful, not just because, he's my kid, but that he has the ability and the want to be able to do those things. He's never gone to, a Bible school and taken He's taken a few correspondence lessons on the internet, but he's never gone and had professional training or any such thing as that. Now, I've encouraged him to get some training, especially on the internet. You can do all kinds of things like that. When I went to college at CRC, somebody, if they'd have said internet, they'd have said, "What are you talking about?" You know, there's no such thing. Gratitude needs not only to be genuinely felt, it needs to be expressed. That was word one. How about a word of confidence? I'll tell you. Grew up somebody asked me where my kinfolks were from. I'm from this area, born and raised, 54 years old, never left town. I'm from the Dixie, Shugtown area. That's where all my kinfolks are. And 1981, I graduated from high school. And that was a big year for me. I obeyed the gospel. I got married. I got me a real job, as I called it. Dad had me working on the farm still, but I did a lot of things in 1981. And as I obeyed the gospel, the preacher at Mulberry, and I see some Mulberryites here today, he encouraged me a great deal, Brother Morris Greenway. And he found out that when I was in high school, I was in public speaking in the FFA. And I went all the way to the state finals, and I was the first loser, second place. You know, that's the way it is. Second place is first loser. But he found out that I could do that, and he said, "Wow, you come out to my house, we're going to get you to speak." Speak. I mean, I was like this, you know, I was 18 years old. But he said, "I know you can do it." A word of confidence. And of course, I was all, you know, stammering and stuttering, and that 20-minute lesson lasted about 6 minutes. And I was finished. That was it. And he told me, he said, "Don't start repeating yourself when you get up there." So I knew that when I was done, I was done. So I was done. But for 4 years, he encouraged me, and he took me everywhere. Or I thought he was taking me everywhere. Little places like Croft. Anybody remember Croft out at Stanford? Little places over in Cardinal, Cochran. Preached there several times. Little places like that. He said, "Let me tell you something, young man." He said, "You need always to be ready." He said, "I've been to places before where they'll greet me at the door and they'll know who I am, and they'll say, 'You know, we've got everything that we need this morning to have service except for a song leader and a preacher. Everything we need but those two things.'" And he said, "I had to do both." He said, "You need to be ready." Words of confidence. He knew and believed that I could do it. You know, we need to believe the best about one another. This world's full of enough negativity. It's full of enough downgrading type of rhetoric and language. But we need to believe in the best of each other and express that sentiment. Let's look at 2 or 3 places in the Scriptures. The book of Philemon. Not a very long book. Just one chapter. And when we think about, you know, the message in it, it's a unique message. Philemon owned a slave. He didn't mistreat the slave, but the slave ran away. Paul knew the slave too. He knew Philemon. He had taught the slave. The slave had become a Christian. But you know what he told the slave? He said, "You need to go back to your master." And he wrote this letter to Philemon. And he expressed his concern about the slave. In verse 21 is one of my favorite verses of the book of Philemon. He said, "Having confidence in thy obedience, I wrote unto thee, knowing that thou wilt also do more than I say." I know who you are. I know how you are. And I have confidence in you. You know, that's important. To have that kind of a relationship, and then don't hold it back. You know, regret someday. I wish I'd have told brother so-and-so, sister so-and-so, that I had confidence in them. It would have encouraged them. Brethren, I'm telling you, it is hard to remain faithful these days. I don't care what, age of life or stage of life you're in. There are things out there. And if we will tell one another what kind of confidence we have in each other, I think it would certainly go a long way to help. God had a man who he thought an awful lot of. His name was Abraham. Boy, the story of Abraham is a wonderful story. We've just gone through that particular story over at Antioch in one of our classes. In the book of Genesis, in Genesis chapter 18, Abraham is visited by 3 angels of God, and he is told of the doom of Sodom. But these angels express something that God had in mind about Abraham. And this is something, men, I'll tell you, you need to express to your young sons and your young grandsons, because men, we've got a grave responsibility. In Genesis chapter 18 and verse 19 and 20, it says, "For I know him," talking about Abraham, "that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord, to do justice and judgment, and that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he hath spoken of him. The Lord said, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it, which is come unto me, and if not, I will know." But he said that about Abraham. I know him, and I'm confident in him. I know he's going to command his house and his children. I hope the Lord can say that of me, of the way that I've done whatever I've done. I hope the Lord can say that, and we can expect that he will. That's what hope is. One more. Let's go to the book of Romans. Romans chapter 15. Paul had never been to Rome, but yet he wrote the Roman Christians here a letter. He was going to get to go to Rome. Maybe not exactly the way you'd think, but he got to go to Rome. But in Romans chapter 15, in verse 14, he says, "And I myself am also persuaded of you, my brethren, that ye also are full of goodness, filled with all knowledge, and able also to admonish one another." Teach, admonish, that carries with it a great deal of things. And you're all able to do that and still be coherent and such as that. The scriptures are full of positives and negatives, and there are a lot of people say, don't teach anything negative. Well, it's full of both. And I think words of confidence can also be used as like this. We have to tell the negative sometimes. Never was very good at singing, but the good brethren at Mulberry, you're up there, boy, if you're a young man. Here we go. Here we are. And Vanessa helped me at home with these things, and I would tell Brother Pilla, who was one of our elders at the time, I said, "Boy, I just don't know. I don't know if I can do this." And he said, "We believe you can. And we would not have asked you to do this if we didn't believe that you could." A word of confidence. So I put that foot up there and one foot in front of the other, and sometimes, if I didn't get one just right, he was really good, and he would get me aside afterwards, and we'd take that song book and he would, "No, you don't do it this way, you do it this way." So he helped me in that respect. We need to tell the men and the young men who participate in the worship and teach the classes that we have confidence in them. It's a struggle for a young man especially to be able to stand in front of a group. Maybe you've never done that before, and that's tough. And you know, the easiest thing to do is to teach them when they're this little to stand up in front of a group. And then it's a lot easier for them when they get older. But we need to tell them what a good example they're setting for everybody else. And the older men who have done it for a long time, we need to tell them of what a good example that they're setting for everybody else. What about the women and the young women? They teach the Bible classes too. I don't know who said it, but it's a true statement. The hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. And that is a true statement if ever there was one. When my kids were growing up, mama, 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 mama. That's all it was. I know she wanted to change her name, but she couldn't. And a couple weeks ago, I have 2 grandsons, one 8, one 4. I took them fishing. Boy, that was a trip. Pawpaw, 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 you know. I got hooked, you know, in the pants leg. It was a trip. Train those children. Young women, follow those older women's example. Teaching the classes. Dressing modestly. Being polite and kind. And keepers at home. Boy, that dressing modestly thing, I hammer that down every chance I get, you know. You go to Walmart, if you're a man, you've got to go through Walmart just like this right here. It's a shame. It is. We need to be modest. The Scriptures teach us to be modest in our dress and our appeal. Boy, I tell you, it's rough. That was word number 2. Encouraging words. Words of hope. Like I said at the beginning of the lesson, you know, it's this world's rough. It's getting rougher all the time. Our little town that we grew up in. Think about that. Think about how the little town that we grew up in right here is different than it is today. But there's hope, and it's not in this world. It's not in this town. Hope is in Christ. Hope in Christ is one of our most precious possessions. The Scriptures, again, I refer to the Scriptures time and time again. If you want to know how to live or how to do, you need to read the Scriptures and apply the Scriptures to our lives. 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 3 and 4, Peter said, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, which according to His abundant mercy," not just mercy, but abundant mercy, "hath begotten us again into a lively hope by the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to inheritance incorruptible, undefiled, and that fadeth not away." And it's reserved in heaven for you. You who are kept, I always say that to you, you who are kept by the power of God through faith unto salvation, ready but to be revealed in the last time. Heaven, a prepared place for prepared people. That hope that we have. Another one of Paul's messages to the church at Ephesus. You know, as far as congregations go, I have my opinion. Boy, Ephesus was a tender spot in Paul's heart. He lived there and taught there for about 3 years. He knew everyone. In the book of Ephesians chapter 1 and verse 18, in his letter to them, he said, "The eyes of your understanding being enlightened, that you may know what is the hope of His calling, and what the riches of His glory of His inheritance in the saints." And he has another superlative, exceeding greatness of His power. I love those superlatives. Hope. You know, I think sometimes people have the wrong idea of the hope that's talked about in the Scriptures. Oh, I hope it's there. I hope heaven's. Well, it's there. We know it's there. The Scriptures tell us it's there. God has made His promises. God is the best promiser that ever was. He never breaks His promise. Now, people, on the other hand, we try our best sometimes not to break a promise, but sometimes we have to. But hope, you know. I hope it don't rain the rest of the week. Vanessa and I are also building a house out by Pine Knot. I thought I'd never do that again, but I am. And I hope it don't rain the rest of this week so they can get a little of the dirt work done around my home. But you know, I'm probably going to be disappointed because it's probably going to rain toward the end of the week. I saw the forecast. That's different than the hope that's found in the Scriptures. The hope that we have in Christ, He has promised us an eternal home for eternity. As my dad used to say, forever is a long time. That hope is real. God promised it, I can expect to have it. But you know, we need to teach these words of hope to everybody. You know, everybody has bad days. I have them, you have them. Everybody has bad days. Maybe we have a bad week. Maybe we have a bad month. Could even possibly have a bad year. We need to encourage one another with these words of hope. And understand and know that if we make friends with the world, and sometimes we see people who go back into the world and make friends with the world, we cannot be pleasing to God if we do that. Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Now, folks, I'm an outdoorsman. I love to hunt and fish. I don't know which I'd rather do. They're both a lot of fun to me. But that's not all that there is to life. He's not telling us that we can't love to hunt and fish or go to the lake or whatever it may be. If we love the world more than we love God and doing His will and having His will a part of us every day, those things are put here for us to cause us great enjoyment. He wants us to enjoy our lives. But we need to encourage one another with words of hope. Christ's charge to His apostles was that we go and make more disciples. Christ's charge to all of us is the same thing. Go and make more disciples. Words of hope. You know, several years ago, and I hadn't been paying attention to that clock. Y'all tell me, somebody say, you know, I have no idea what time we started or when we're going to end.
Second bell.
Second bell, okay. Fixing to ring the first one. All right. Well, I'm winding it down. Yeah. All right. Words of hope. You can't tell by looking at me, but back when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, I ran a lot. Physically ran a lot. I love to run. And two of my children have taken that same hobby up and staying in shape and doing that kind of thing. They run. My oldest daughter, she runs these half marathons, and I just wish that I was able to run them with her. I wish I could, but I can't. I've ran several races with her way back when, but I can't do it anymore. But I made friends with a fellow one summer. I'd known him for a long time, but he was working at the factory too. And we worked from 4 o'clock until 12:30 at night. Got off on the second shift. We get off and we go to the Harmon playfield over here, and we'd run 3, 4, 5, 6 miles. Boy, I did a lot of preaching while we ran. You know, one of the things, if you're a jogger and if you learn to run, is that you need to build a gait and build your endurance enough up so that you can carry on the conversation while you're running. So we did. And as a result of that, taught he and his future wife, and was fortunate enough to baptize them into the Lord, and fortunate enough to perform their wedding. What a great deal. Words of hope. That's what we gave them. In Ephesians chapter 3, verses 17 through 20, and 20 is one of my favorite verses in all the New Testament. Talking about what hope we have, that Christ may dwell in your hearts by faith, that ye being rooted and grounded in love may be able to comprehend with all the saints what is the breadth, the length, the depth, and the height, and to know the love of Christ which passeth knowledge, that ye might be filled with all the fullness of God. Now unto him that is able to do exceeding abundantly, above all that we ask or think, according to the power that worketh in us. Words of hope. Encouraging words. Pass them along. We all need them. Thank y'all very much. Thank you, man.